Well, a very important concept in SQL and data management is null. So what is a null? A null is a special value to mark a missing value. Either it's a non-existing or unknown. For example, the main name. A lot of attribute, if you think about it, a lot of relation, when you define a relation, many attributes may not have a value for a specific instance. For example, min name, right? Min name, some people don't have a min name. It's not that they have an empty string of min name. They just don't have a min name. Or like home phone number. These days, everybody have a cell phone. People may not have a home phone, however. So this is not zero, right? This is not zero. It's not the mid name of zero. It's not the mid name of an empty string. It's not the mid name of something that we are not populating. Or we are not populating. Instead, it's just missing. There's no data. There's no non-existing. Or sometimes it's unknown. Like you don't know what the mid name is, so you put it unknown. This is represented using the keyword null, N-U-L-L. Now this is now is a case is case insensitive. You can write uppercase or uppercase N-U-L-L. You can write the or lowercase N-U-L-L. You can write the title case uppercase N followed by lowercase U-L-L. Doesn't matter. SQL will be able to tell that this is the keyword null. And this now will specify, will tell SQL that this value is missing. There's no value inside this cell. And note that this now is written just as NULL. Do not put a single quote or double quote around it. Once you put a single quote around it, it becomes a string which contains 2 or 4 characters NULL. It's no longer the keyword now, which specifies there's the missing value. The value is missing. So we just mentioned that the why now is coming because some attributes can be can have no value. It can have the value can be missing. Some attribute, however, cannot have a missing value. For example, primary key, because by definition, primary key is will functionally determines everything else. If you have if you have a missing primary key, the primary key is missing, then it's not determining anything. It's not going to give you any information or any indication on what this tuple may contain. Because everything is missing, you cannot, just like the old saying, you cannot make something out of nothing. And now here is that nothing. You cannot make out a tuple by specifying a null to the primary key. Also, some other attributes may not be a primary key, but they can be they may not be null either. This usually is determined by the real-world scenario. For example, in our school, emergency contact number you have to have an emergency contact number for every student. It cannot be null, right? So it's not null. This column is not null, although it is not a primary key. So how do you specify a column has to be not null? It's specified after the data type definition, before the comma. You can have multiple not nulls in one table. For example, when you define student ID and student name, you can if you define a relation a student, you can specify student ID, student name, student emergency contact number all be not null in one table. Of course, primary key is automatically not null because, as we said, primary key cannot be null at all. If you don't specify not null to the column, then default is nullable. If you don't specify a column is not null, then you can have null in that column, unless it's primary key. Then primary key is automatically not null. And this is how you define it. Instructor affiliation, char 100, not null. That means this column is not null. You cannot insert a null into this column. A default value, however, is null. And when you try to change a column to now or not now, like we said, Postgres definition is a little bit, it's not as straightforward. You have to define table first. You have to specify alter table, table name, specifying which table to change, followed by alter column, column name, and then you will set not now or drop not now or set now. How do you insert a now into a table? You will insert now by missing out column names. For example, we all know instructor has two columns. Table instructor have two columns. Table instructor name and instructor affiliation. Let's assume if the instructor affiliation is nullable, it can contain null. So when you run this insert instructor with only specify instructor name without specifying instructor affiliation, and only provides one value for that instructor name, then after you run this insert, a row will be inserted with open Lars as the instructor name and now as instructor affiliation because you didn't specify the value for this instructor affiliation. Or on the other way of doing that is you can directly using the reserve now. For example, you can insert into instructor without column list, values, open Lars, and now. Without column list, you are by default inserting the column order of instructor name and the instructor affiliation. So in this the column list, the second one is the instructor affiliation. In the value list, meanwhile, the second one is now. So you are specifying, you are inserting now into the second column, instructor affiliation. Here, note that you cannot use single quote. You cannot use single quote around now. You should just use the keyword now. NULL without single quote. If you add a single quote, then it automatically becomes a string. Then you are inserting the string NULL into instructor affiliation instead of inserting a missing value. Inserting the keyword specifying it's a missing value. If a column has a default value, however, DBMS will insert the default value instead of now. So, the first issue, the first statement only works when there's no default value. But the second statement works even if there is a default value. So inserting now is always the preferred option because you may change the default value at a certain point. But the second way of doing this will always work, will always insert a now. If you have a default value for instructor affiliation, for example, if I insert the default that to Jedi, then this statement insert into instructor name, values, open Lars, will insert a row with open Lars as the instructor name and the default value Jedi as the instructor affiliation. And finally, if you have a column defined as not now, then you cannot insert now into it, including the primary key. That means not now columns must be in the column list of insert statement. If it's not in the column list of the insert statement, you are by default, you are trying to insert a now to it. Also, you cannot explicitly specify you want to insert now into that column. Either way, the insert statement will result in the error from DBMS. So now we can set the value to now in update statement. Update, as always, update the table name, set actual tuition equals to now, right? Where column, where course name equals to force choking. This course is no longer offered, so we are setting the tuition as now.